get up and.
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight for the public meeting on the East Milton Deck project. Thank you. We're going to call to order this Board of Selectmen's meeting. Unfortunately, our chairman, David Burns, had a personal conflict that came up, and he is not able to be here tonight. But Richard Wells and I are here representing the board tonight, and we're going to turn this over to our town planning director, Bill Clark, who is going to introduce the Howard Stein Hudson team and other representatives who are here this evening. And we're very pleased that the representatives of the state, Massachusetts Department of Transportation, are here tonight as well. So thank you all for coming. We know there'll be an opportunity for questions to be asked and comments to be provided after the presentation. And we'll look forward to hearing those in a few minutes, in a little while after we hear the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay. Thanks.
Abandoned ship. Leave you up there.
Okay. This is a public information meeting long promised by the selectmen. This meeting is a follow-up to the state's Mass Department of Transportation's 25% hearing from September 2015. As background, this project is a state project over a federal highway with input from the community. The Mass Department of Transportation is paying for the design engineering. The town of Milton has had opportunities to make comments all along the way to this design. I want to take a minute to introduce the consulting engineers from Howard Stein Hudson, Bridget Myers and Mark Gravelisi. There's a team of folks here, and I'll let Bridget and Mark introduce the rest of the Howard Stein Hudson team. They'll now take and lead us through what has been happening since the 2011 report, the parking and access study that was completed in 2011. If you'll hold your questions until the end of the presentation, we'll have plenty of time for questions. When asking questions, let's try and be respectful of others, not repeat our questions. This is a meeting to gather local input, and that input we will try to get all of that input and add it into the pertinent components of the 75% design. With that, Bridget.
Thanks, Bill. So to introduce our team, as Bill mentioned, my name is Bridget Myers, and with me I've got Mark Gravelisi, I have got Kate Andrews and Nate Cabell-Curtis from our public involvement team, and I've got Alex Sue here as well, who is the manager of our traffic department. And we've also got Rich Houghton from Halverson Design, who's going to be assisting us with our landscape architecture as we move forward. So we're here for the East Milton Square reconstruction project that Howard Stein Hudson has been working with the town on. And right now this project has an add date of January 5th, 2019, which is now a little less than a year and a half away. And so tonight we're just going to be going over everything that's been going on this past 2 years, because it's been almost 2 years to the date since we've been in front of you guys. For the last time was the 25% design public hearing. Our project team, again, is Town of Milton, the proponent for the project, Howard Stein Hudson, the consulting engineering, Mass DOT, who's providing oversight with design process, and they'll be providing resident engineering services during construction. And Federal Highway Administration also has oversight of this project as they own the land over I-93. Brief project history timeline. We worked with the town back in 2001 on the parking and access study, and following that came the closure of Adams Street in 2012. In 2014, we had a couple of public informational meetings, which led to the submission of the 25% design to Mass DOT in December of 2014. Then we had the 25% design public hearing in September of 2015. That was the last time we were here. And following that hearing, we took the feedback that we heard and also just some more internal look at the design, made some slight modifications. It's also the time when we heard from FHWA that we'd be required to do a Section 4F programmatic evaluation, which I will get to in a few slides. But that was an environmental permitting process that we had to go through, and that was submitted to FHWA on July 27th, 2016. So after we submitted that, we heard back from FHWA and the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs with comments from them, and we received those comments in February of 2017. So with those comments, we regrouped and looked at our options. We also were in attendance at a Board of Selectmen meeting in June of 2017, and now we're here. So this is just an overview of the project limits that you've probably seen before. The yellow area just shows our whole project area of East Milton Square with Adams Street, Granite, Bryant Boulevard, Edge Hill, and Bassett Street. And that yellow area shows the limits that we go on all of those streets. These are our project goals, and just want to say that they've been the same goals we've had from the beginning of the project. We want to improve the pedestrian connections and safety, update the traffic signal equipment, improve the traffic operations and safety. We want to provide bicycle accommodations throughout the square, formalize the discontinuation of Adams Street over I-93, which will strengthen the connection between the east and west sides of the square, provide better wayfinding for users around the square, and revitalize this park space. On the slide, on the picture on the side, you'll see that's the existing traffic signal master controller. And right now that is housed in the basement of the fire station that's on the corner of Granite and Adams Street. So that master controller controls all of the signals in the square. And the current signals are run on a time-based coordination. So at any time the town wants to make any adjustments to the phasing or the traffic signal timing, they have to have one person down there making the changes, talking on the phone to someone out in the square with a stopwatch to make sure everything's working. Now, this is kind of a cumbersome process, and so that'll be one of the good improvements that this project will make. You'll have a new signal controller, which will not be in the basement, and just it'll be able to use our signal detection to get better traffic progression, and it'll just make all the coordination work better. So the Section 4F evaluation. So this is what we had to submit to FHWA. This is because they have oversight with their air rights over I-93. And because we were proposing to place a parking lot on some area of the deck, so that would be converting some of the park area that is there today to parking, we had to do this Section 4F evaluation, and that is referring to the Section 4F of the DOT Act of 1966, which just protects this land. It prevents FHWA and DOT agencies from converting parks, recreation areas, refuges, historic sites to any other uses. So in order to do that, we provided this document which explained a net benefit to a Section 4F property. So our net benefit argument is that we were trying to activate this underutilized park by providing an updated park space with a directly abutting parking area. So this would bring people directly into the park, and it would provide a revitalized park area, and then people, even if they were just using the parking lot to visit one of the businesses, would still be, in direct proximity to the park, and it would just get more use. So this is showing our preferred alternative that was part of the Section 4F document. And this looks different than the design that we had at the 25% design public hearing. So we took the feedback we heard at that meeting as well as some more internal look at the design, and one of the changes that we made was we had flipped the park and the parking. We moved the park to the north side of the deck, which was kind of deemed the more quiet side, and this was also where we did some pedestrian observations, and that showed us that more people were using that side of the deck, which put the parking area on the south side. And we also saw that a desire line for the pedestrians was to follow in the alignment of Adams Street, so that's why we moved the shared use path. We moved it to kind of run along where the old Adams Street used to be. So, and I will get to that red rectangle in just a second. After we submitted to FHWA, they came back with a comment letter. And their comment letter basically said that they wanted to see an alternative that made the proposed park area the same as the existing park area. So when we kind of ran through the numbers there, the areas, it showed us that we'd have to take roughly another 5,000 square feet out of the parking lot area and convert it back to parkland to get those areas to match. So that is what that red rectangle is showing you right there. That's roughly 5,000 square feet, and that would need to be taken out of the parking lot area. And what that leaves you with is a pretty awkward parking lot, because we would need to keep the driveway entrances here, because we really can't get them any closer to Boulevard Street without having the driveway entrances interfering with the intersections. So this leaves you with a space for roughly maybe 7 or 8 parking spaces and a very kind of awkward circulation. We also got a comment letter back from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, and they stated that this land was protected by Article 97, which also protects parkland. And so any change in use of this area would require approval from MassDOT, FHWA, and a 2/3 vote by the Massachusetts legislature. So using these comment letters that we received back, we looked at some potential paths that we could take forward. One of them would be to revise the plan per the FHWA letter, which would be that plan I just showed you with taking the 5,000 square feet out of the parking lot. You would end up with that kind of awkward space and not a lot of space for parking. And one thing to note is you'd still lose, see here, to get the parking lot in, we had to remove these parallel parking spots on Bryant Ave. So you'd still lose those spaces, and I think that's 7 spaces there. And again, this would require additional time and money to revise the document and resubmit to FHWA. So that puts a delay in the schedule, which kind of lends up risk to losing the earmarks. Last year, the town received a letter from Congressman Capuano's office, as did several other municipalities across the state that have these earmarks. And they were looking at earmarks that were older than 10 years old and that had used less than 10% of their funding. And they were just kind of giving these municipalities warning that these earmarks could be repurposed. There was no date or any deadline of those, but it is out there, and so it was kind of basically like a use it or you might lose it type letter. And then if we do submit to FHWA, there's still no guarantee that that would get an approval. Another potential path forward is removing the parking lot from the deck and leaving the whole area as park space. So this would not affect the design schedule because we would not have to resubmit to FHWA, and we could just move forward with our MassDOT process. This would restore the 7 spaces back onto Bryant Ave. You'd have a larger area for revitalized park design, and then there's still options for the town to look into investigating parking alternatives. One of these is what recently happened on Bryant Avenue, where all those spaces were previously service spaces, and they've now been converted back to 2-hour, just regular parking spots. And then another thing that we've discussed with the town is there's the possibility of adding angled or reverse angled parking on Edge Hill by converting that to a one-way heading west, and then you could fit in the angled parking spaces. And just doing a quick look at that, I was able to fit in 4 angled spaces in the space where you could fit in 2 parallel spaces. So, you could possibly nearly double the spaces on Edge Hill. Another topic that we want to discuss tonight that we know has been brought up recently in town, and also at the June Board of Selectmen meeting that Mark was in attendance at, that the town is asking about, well, what about reopening Adams Street? So to go back and just reiterate that the closure happened in 2012, and at the time that was deemed a success. It worked with the circulation. Now we know it's been 5 years, so there's, most definitely probably an increase in traffic volumes into the square. So it's probably not working as great as it did back in 2012. But something to remember is that with our proposed traffic improvements, the new signals, the new design, that'll get better. It'll work better with the new signals and the new coordination. And also the parking and access study showed that many of the parking issues were due to a lack of clear circulation and an unfriendly pedestrian environment with having Adams Street running through there. You've got another movement that cars are making, and then cars going down Adams Street don't have that opportunity to kind of go around the square because they couldn't take a left onto Granite, so they're missing the opportunity to find parking on Bryant and Granite. And then there's just more moves that pedestrians have to worry about with cars. So closing that off created kind of a traffic calming. It's more comfortable for pedestrians with the cars all circulating around the square in the same direction. The closure of Adams Street also reduces the decisions that drivers have to make at those intersections with Bryant and Granite. And the impacts to this would be that none of the parking and access study recommendations would get implemented. And more importantly, we'd have to do a complete redesign of the project. That'd be a pretty major design change, so we'd have to go start over. We'd have to redo our 25% design plans, resubmit to Mass DOT. So that kind of starts us over with the Mass DOT design process. And that would kind of add some significant time to the schedule, and we probably would not make our add date then. So then that goes back to the possibility of losing the earmarks. Those are all related. And then another thing to add is that if that gets reopened, there's a pretty high probability that any improvements to the park probably aren't going to happen at that point. This is another topic that came up at that Board of Selectmen meeting that we wanted to touch on. There was a question about turning left from Granite onto Boulevard. So while we see why some people would want that, obviously that would be an easy left turn for people that wanted to go in that direction instead of going around the square. But we would not recommend it, and for a few reasons. Right now, this is a very short stretch of Boulevard Street right here. And right now, with our proposed design, we were able to get 3 lanes in here. So that's another lane to stack cars in here to get cars around. Now, if we had to make this a left turn going up Boulevard, we'd lose that again. So that would create more congestion there. And the other issue is that, particularly at peak hours, cars are going to be trying to get through here. Those cars that go right as the light's going to turn red, and you're inevitably going to get cars that are going to get stuck in the box there, and they're going to block traffic coming down Boulevard. So those are the reasons, and that's just going to add delays onto Granite and Boulevard. So we would not recommend that design change. So all this has led us to our current proposed concept, which is the remove the parking lot from the deck concept. And this leaves us with the bigger park area in the middle and the restored spaces on Bryant. A few other design changes I just wanted to touch on that had been made since the 25% design public hearing is that we kind of went back and relooked at our bicycle accommodations and found that we were able to kind of improve on some of those in some areas. On Adams and Bryant, we were able to bump the curb out here, and that's allowed us to create a separated bike lane. So this right here, this bike lane, is actually at sidewalk level. So you would have, your buffer from the street, a bike lane, and then you have the sidewalk behind it. And then they would ramp down and rejoin the regular on-street bike lane here. So there's additional bike ramps, bike crossings. We've still got the shared use path. We added a couple more bike crossings here. And one other thing that we added was the, right here, is this little box right here. That's a 2-stage left turn box for bicycles. And what that means is that bikes traveling down Bryant Ave, if they want to take a left onto Boulevard and they don't feel comfortable just going through the intersection, when Bryant has the green light, they can just go up to this box and wait here in front of the vehicles waiting to go through. and then when Boulevard gets the green, they can go over to their bike lane.
Go back.
Sorry.
Forgot about the squared off crossing for pedestrians.
Oh, yes, sorry. One other thing to mention over here is that we had heard that pedestrians crossing the street right here can be scary sometimes, as the cars kind of go around this corner pretty quickly if they have the green, and then even if they have the red, they might not even see it and pull too far in. So what we did when we bumped out this curb to get the bike lane in, we were able to square off these crossings better. So they're more separated from the cars. The cars are now, stop line is way back here. They'll be able to see the signals better, and then the pedestrians will have a safer space to cross here, and they could cross here as well. So just a summary of our transportation improvements, and this is a same slide we used 2 years ago because all this stuff is still the same. We're upgrading all of the traffic signal equipment, new traffic signal controllers. There'll be vehicle detection, pedestrian countdown indications, APS push buttons at all the signals, a brand new signal at Bassett Street, new signing and striping throughout the square, including that additional third lane on Boulevard, and a realigned slip ramp where we just tightened up the geometry here so that cars will have to slow down a little bit going around these corners. Our pedestrian and bicycle improvements were the addition of the bike lanes and separated bike lane, the shared use paths, the new ADA compliant sidewalks and ramps, reduced crossing lengths where we could. We bumped out curbs to make the crosswalk distances shorter, and pedestrian upgrades at all the signals. And this plan just shows you in color where the new bicycle accommodations will be. All the green lines indicate bicycle lanes or the bike crossings. The blue is the shared use path, and then the yellow dash are shared lanes. Structural improvements, since we are this is not a bridge project. We're not replacing the deck or anything, but because we're going to be, taking back the pavement, doing work in the park, there are improvements that can be made while that work is being done. One of them identified by Mass DOT is that there is a leak onto I-93 South coming from the deck, so that is something that we're going to be looking to fix throughout this project. We'll also need to be waterproofing the whole deck, replacing that waterproofing membrane. And then any other improvements needed before construction is complete. And one of those would be the irrigation system. We know the one out there right now does not work, so it either needs to be fixed or replaced. So we'll be coordinating that with Mass DOT prior to the 75% design submittal. Park improvements. So one of the things we wanted to create this space as a space to gather, make this Manning Park a destination. So we looked at desire lines with pedestrians, where they're going now. That led us to where we put the shared use paths. And also I went back, I know we posed this question at our last meeting 2 years ago, so I went back and looked at the transcript. And some of the comments that the public had made at that time, where they'd like to see something for children, a gazebo or a small stage for events, concerts, a fountain or splash pad, a fence or some sort of buffer to provide some safety for people in the park. And someone brought up a possibility of having a drinking fountain in the park for runners, walkers, cyclists. Those are all ideas that came out at the last public meeting. This is just a SketchUp rendering, so this just gives you kind of more of a 3D look of what the square could look like with the proposed improvements. I just want to reiterate that the design in the park right now is not the proposed park design. That's just kind of something we came up with for this rendering. We know that we thought having some sort of landscape buffer, trees at either the north and south sides would be good at kind of making that buffer from the noise from I-93. In reality, those trees would need to be on something raised, whether it be a mounded landscaped area or something with a wall, as you can't, as the deck isn't deep enough just to plant trees on. But in general, and then you would get kind of an open, more usable, smooth space throughout the middle. But that's just kind of one idea we've came up with right now, and we'll be working with a landscape architect. I'm not a landscape architect. the construction costs. Right now, the town has 2 earmarks to use, and they total $2.2 million. That total funding available, which is the earmarks plus the state's match, right now is $2.75 million. And based on our 25% design, the transportation improvements cost about $1.85, and that's everything except for the park or any structural improvements. So that's just what's happening on the roadways, the signals, the striping, all that. So, that's roughly $900,000 there that can be made up with the structural improvements and landscape costs, which currently we do not know the extent of those. Our anticipated project schedule, right now we're in the blue dot there. Our last deliverable was Section 4F evaluation in July 2016, and we're hopefully moving towards a 75% design submittal to Mass DOT in December, which would follow by 100% and final design next summer with an advertised date, like I said, January 5th, 2019. Our next steps would be to advance the 75% design by working with our landscape architect and our structural engineer. And we'd also want to get public input for any improvements that could be made to the park, possibly a design charrette with our landscape architect, but that we can discuss that. So let me hand it back to Bill if he wants to say anything else, or if anyone from the town wants to say anything before we open it up to questions.
I think one of the points that you may make, can you give us a better explanation of why so much discussion about pedestrian and bicycle in the square where the majority of people are thinking about cars?
So, well, one of the reasons is that this project is going through the Mass DOT review process, and they have the healthy transportation policy. So all projects need to be looked at with bicyclists and pedestrians in mind. Whenever there's an opportunity to reconstruct roadways, you always have to look for those opportunities to add pedestrians and cyclists. Just because they're not using it now doesn't mean they wouldn't. So when you add the facilities for them, then you bring them to the area and you get more pedestrians, you get more cyclists using the area, and hopefully, that means you get less people driving here.
Funny. Humorous.
I know that we looked at some of the landscape plan concepts up here, but again, those were concepts. It's very, very preliminary at this point. The project's landscape architect has yet to meet with the entire team, so again, it's preliminary. What you saw were just concepts, and there is nothing that we have talked about, thought about how landscape will be on the deck, which will remain, which might change. That is yet to be determined. Rich is here. He's part of that team. He will be attending from now on, so we'll have that input. You ready for questions? Sure. At this point, we invite the public up. If you have comments, we'd like to, again, keep it to, try not to repeat the questions, try to be succinct. We will be taking notes and trying to add in the pertinent comments into the 75% design. I'd like to try to set the timer at 3 minutes, and I invite you up to ask your questions.
Bill, can I just start with a question first that I have? There had not previously been talk about expanding the size of the park and taking over another 5,000 square feet of non-Article 97 land and now converting it into Article 97 land. Was there any consideration given to, if not reopening Adams Street, using that space where it physically is, not moving parking to the back, which was under the original plan with 25 spaces on the south side, but keeping parking where Adams Street, the closure section currently is, and just using that for parking? Was there any consideration given to designing for that purpose?
Yes, there was, and we can talk about it in detail. Can we pull up the slide, please, Bridget? And I'm going to butcher it, and then our manager of traffic, Alex, is going to bail me out.
Which slide do you want?
One that shows, yeah, we can go with this one. Okay, so if you were to open up Adam Street for parking, whether in a one-way direction or on one end where cars would have to make their way into Adam Street and then find their way back out the same direction, you would still need to signalize the intersection, and you would lose the significant safety improvements where we have shorter pedestrian crossings, the stop line for Adam Street approaching the square is pushed back for better visual cues for everyone, and the circulation through the square would be delayed even more because you're adding an additional signal in, and it would be kind of a detriment to the results of the parking and access study. Alex, did I do us any justice there?
Yeah, so in addition to those things that Mark had said, by adding an exit coming on Adams Street towards Granite Avenue, you're also introducing a safety risk as well, because people may try to use that as a cut through, which is not what we want to do by having, a straight path through that deck. So in addition to some delay that you would probably see because you need to signalize that approach, you would also likely see a lot of cut throughs through that area as well.
Or if you made it the other way, you're going to get people cutting through. Just as the people who wanted the left onto Boulevard are just now going to use that area to go up that direction.
Okay, thank you.
I've been asked to have people sign in on the yellow sheet, and if I can get Nate to pass that yellow sheet around and see anybody that wants to speak, come on up.
Just put your hands up, folks, in the back. You first. And then I'll circulate it through the back, and I'll use my folder as before. I'm Mike Mahalchik. I live in East Milton on Bunton Street, and I could be a pedestrian walking through this park someday if it ever gets built, because I live so close, and there's some amenities on the other side of the park. The Milton Arts Center right now is there, which is a good thing to walk to. So I can see a lot of potential in your design to make it all parkland and beautiful. It's loud there. You probably want to put a wall on to block off the sound from the highway. And there's one small thing I'd like to keep on. Probably it's early in the game for this design, but there was a clock that was designed to commemorate the 350th anniversary of the town. And it's been in storage for so long that it's almost becoming a historic relic as we wait for it to be placed in its final location, which was intended to be in East Milton, and I would like to have it be in a prominent place in this park where we could all see it.
We actually do have the clock scheduled to be there. We also have the McIntyre family has donated a bike rack to the town that they will care for, they will repair as necessary. It's for, I'm going to forget one of the two. McIntyre brothers were both teachers at the middle school. One was in guidance, the other was the principal. And the father, one of them, Ken, had a bicycle accident, and his family has asked that the bike rack be placed somewhere in town, and we thought that since he was from East Milton, it would be a very good place for him. He had heard about it. He thought it was a really nice idea. They like it. It's an art project that has been done by students. It's going to actually be something that will historically work towards the granite rail that was there before, so it's actually an interesting design that we've seen that they have plans for. So both of those will be incorporated into the landscape design on the deck.
Oh,
Just to follow up,
glad to
Mike,
hear that.
on, we just reappointed the 350th committee just at our last meeting last week. The clock that you referred to, which is identical to the clock that was placed in the Central Art Business District, as part of the legacy gift of our 350th anniversary. We just met this week. Chase Berkeley, our new DPW director, is fully aware of it, and it is high on the radar of the 350th committee who met already this week, and I can assure you that it will be in a place of prominence, fitting in East Milton
I'm walking away
Square.
from the microphone very happy man.
Thanks, Mike.
That's the easiest of all the things we have to do.
Next person will be, I'm sorry, I mispronounce people's names, and Bobby looks like Ken Lewandowski.
Ken, right here.
Thank you. My name is Ken Lewandowski. I live at 24 Granite Place in East Milton. Very nice presentation. Thank you very much. I am a little disappointed that we lost some of the parking on the deck. Unfortunately, I think the square could use some additional parking. So my question is, have you looked at putting parking on the east side of the deck, parallel parking along the east side of the deck to pick up a few spaces? You know, right along Granite Ave.
You mean near the liquor store?
No, right on the east side of the park, but on,
Just
it'd be the west side of Granite Ave. Right along there, yes. I mean, I understand why we lost the parking. That was all interesting, and I understand all of the regulations and everything around that. But we certainly could use more parking. And I think it would be worth considering that, you know, because farther down, we have parking on Granite Ave on that
Right.
side of the street anyways.
Parking in that particular location hasn't come up yet, but we can certainly look into that one.
Thank you.
Okay, and people in Milton seem to have very neat handwriting, so thank you for that. Martha Cosgrove? Yep.
Hi, good evening. Martha Cosgrove. I live at 525 Brook Road, lifelong Milton resident. Number one, I'd like to go on record in saying that I am opposed to keeping Adams Street closed. It's just one of those things. Number two, though, I've read in the Milton Times and heard from people that there is a study going on about the fire department and a possible new fire station. Would that in any way impact what is being done, what would possibly being done? And that may be more a question of a selectman.
No decision has been made on that yet. We have a committee there was a committee that looked at different sites, but there's a new building committee that would be taking up the next phase of the work, so.
Correct. But what I'm saying is if the committee, 8 months, a year down the road, decides that something will be done in the area where the fire station is, will remain, or whatever, would that impact everything that is being done?
No.
No.
No. And as a matter of fact, there's been discussions about this going back as far as like informals with the traffic commission. It's been discussed a lot when there was some discussion or a proposal last year to maybe take the arts center and put a firehouse there.
I remember,
There's
yeah.
been a lot of that, but,
Right.
and there was actually the thoughts that, you know, would it fit on the Adams Street part, which really wouldn't be feasible because as this woman spoke, in design and what you'd have to add to change the flow and the traffic pattern and you'd be actually impeding safety versus making it
Okay,
better all along.
okay.
So, as Kate said, it's a separate discussion, but
Correct.
it has
I
been
understand
discussed
that, and
quite
I
a
don't
bit.
mean to veer off too far off, off track. But if the fire station were moved, could there be then potential for parking spaces in that location?
Anything could
Or
happen. That would be up to
any
them.
retail or
Any
anything like
retail,
that.
anything like that could happen.
Anything. But if people are complaining about the parking space issues in the,
I
just
will
a
s-
thought, I suppose.
I will say, informally, we have these discussions all the
I'm sure
time
you
about
do.
every
Okay.
possibility.
And my last question, and I guess it could be directed to you folks again, is because it is a park, is a drive-through road not allowed?
No, I mean, Adams Street was there, so.
Correct, yeah.
But
So Adams
by
Street,
allowing, no, it is, you could reopen Adams Street is allowed in that sense
yeah,
with the
but you're not
environmental.
recommending that.
Right, we're not recommending.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
May I please have Arthur Doyle?
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
I would like to sort of merge Selectman Conlon's question and Mr. Lewandowski's comment about the desirability of parking, in that Selectman Conlon's question received an answer that was predicated on the roadway staying exactly where it is. What I would like to ask you to take under advisement is isolating the area of that roadway and the sidewalks and determining as to whether or not there is any other area where that can be used for parking, so that it is not lost on the basis of where it is now. Okay?
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Melissa Fassel-Dunn, please.
She knew it, I saw her heading this way.
Oh, two of them are there.
Hi, thank you so much for presenting tonight. It's great to see all this creative thinking. My question has to do with the gridlock that currently plagues East Milton. I live at 84 Franklin Street, and I've been an East Milton resident since 2005. So I experienced what it was like to have Adams Street open and then closed. And I can say personally that I never noticed an improvement in the traffic. It always seemed to be a negative that it was closed. And after it closed, that's when we got GPS-based traffic things that brought people through our neighborhood. So it's kind of this perfect storm. That being said, it looks like, and maybe I've missed something because I'm not an engineer, but it looks like to me the only thing done to try to alleviate the gridlock is by implementing the timed lights. Is there something else that I've missed, or is it just the lights?
Or,
Yeah, we added some lanes on Boulevard.
so yeah, one of the so yes, there'll be
third
all
one.
new traffic signals, and they're going to work. They're going to work differently than the current traffic signals. They're going to be on. They're going to be taking into consideration the detection system there. So improvements can be made a lot easier. They can even be made through the system itself. It can detect where traffic need is
And
based on
how
time
does
of
that-
day.
How does that work? Is it like I've heard, I listen to NPR sort of obsessively sometime, and I've heard like these different reports on how they work, and there's some that have sort of a longer delay than others. Like what are these lights like?
I'm going to defer that one to Alex.
Sure. So there's several different options for the traffic signals. What the issue is here is that the signals in this area are very old,
Right.
and so there's not a lot of detection. A lot of the signal timing is time-based, like Bridget said, and is basically fixed, so it runs the same thing all the time.
Right.
So what we're going to be doing out here is adding detection, so it basically can see when there are cars on certain approaches, when to lengthen certain phases, and when to shorten others based on the amount of traffic that's coming through the area.
Okay, but it's not like live detection based, right?
Like
It's sort of like
adaptive.
an algorithm of some sort. Like is it?
Yeah,
like
so
that?
there's certain kinds. So there can be some, we could use adaptive signal control in this area.
Yeah.
Which is probably what you heard about,
It
which
is.
is an algorithm based, and it basically takes traffic counts continuously and redoes the traffic timing as
Sort
real
of
time.
live. Yeah.
Real time. yeah.
Exactly. But we haven't decided on that.
We
I'm
haven't
assuming.
decided on the types of system at this point.
Okay, so it's it's adding the lane change, and then it's hopefully a super improved
More
lighting.
technology in order to better handle the traffic flow through the area.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Joe Curran, please.
Joe Kern, 30 Grafton Ave. I guess one thing is I'm going to talk about pedestrian access, and I've been talking about pedestrian access in this area for 10 years since the project started. I went to all the beginning meetings. So it seems as if that is something that maybe isn't as important to some people as it is to me in particularly. And when we had the meeting 2 years ago, there was a lot of talk about travel path and signalization and making sure that the traffic lights had audible sounds to them. And one of the things I took away from that was, and I always focus on the intersection of Bryant Ave and Boulevard Street, because that's where my pedestrian access comes from. And the travel path that goes down there, I specifically asked if there was going to be the removal of the control box that's there and the telephone pole. And I was told that there was an ADA study that had to be done, and it would determine whether or not that was an accessible path. And I don't know whether or not that's been done. And I have a picture, I'm going to show it to you, that shows the location. I'll leave this with everybody. That shows a phone pole, and I don't know whether or not that meets the 36-inch clearance or not, but between the phone pole and the box, to me, that is not accessible. So to be adding a lot of accessible features to the crossings doesn't make sense if the town or the business isn't going to make all the paths accessible, which under the Mass Code, I don't think you're required to, but I would suspect that you would do it.
Right. Generally, if it's within our project limits, we would have to make it ADA accessible. So in that case, if that one is falling within our limits, then that would have to be relocated.
Okay. Have you done the ADA study?
Not for that location yet, no.
Okay.
But we had
But-
proposed to remove the controller and relocate it somewhere else.
And I believe you were at the meeting 2 years ago, right? And I believe I talked to you about that phone pole 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure, because the reason I'm focusing on that is also the area where they don't remove snow in the wintertime. So there is no path to go from down the street. There are also poles around the square that indicate no parking and directional turns. And again, in that particular area, there's not enough room to put a piece of equipment. You would have to hand remove or use some sort of a snow blower to remove the snow. They also don't remove the snow on the deck on Boulevard Street. But that, again, that's not for this board to, or this group here, over here to address. And then I guess I'd like to know if we're going to be hanging directional signs from the light poles or from the traffic light poles versus, again, all of these sidewalk-mounted ones, which seem to be impairing some of the pedestrian access into the square, if that's something that the project is going to be doing.
Well, our goal is to reduce the amount of clutter that's within the accessible paths as possible. So we would try to, consolidate signs and posts as much as possible.
Okay. And then, although I guess I'm a little confused too, I just want to make sure that Boulevard Street and Edge Hill Road both remain bi-directional as they are today on the west side, which goes up towards Collycott School. There's obviously a right-hand turning lane there.
Right.
There's a forward lane, which is there now, and it appears to me that there's another directional lane that comes out of the Shell gas station and goes up
Yeah.
the street.
Right, as
Yeah.
it's shown right now, yes.
Yes,
So
okay.
we did mention the Edge Hills. That is something that's being discussed. It's not, definitely hasn't been
Okay.
decided on yet.
And I know that from the presentation, there was some discussion about making Boulevard Street, and I know you said you rejected that, a left-hand turn only, and I just want you to know that I'm not in favor of that, and I understand that it's been rejected, but after the last meeting, we had a presentation, and then 4 weeks later, this 4F plan came out that moved all of the parking to that side, and again, that was never presented to the town, so it just magically kind of happened, and so I'm going to go on record that I'm in favor of that, so that if it doesn't, something does change, I just want you to know.
Okay.
And I think it's a good thing that less than 10% of the money has been used over the 10 years for what has been done so far. I mean, I think that's a benefit. I think that it shows that we've been fiscally conscious with that. And then, again, back to pedestrian crossings, there's some more pictures in there. And for the 10 years this has gone on, and the 10 years prior, I've met with various selectmen in the town of Milton and expressed to them that the traffic signal, especially at Bryan Ave and Boulevard Street, none of those pedestrian signals, when you push a button, work. The one in front of the post office does. The one in front of Bryant and Boulevard Street does not. I was told 20 years ago that it was fixed, and then I was told, no, it's not fixed, and now it just changes whenever it wants with no particular semblance. In the pictures, you'll see that when the lights turn green on Boulevard Street, the crossing signal that allows you to cross Granite Ave to the backside of the firehouse remains so that you can't cross. So the light indicates that you can cross the street. The signal that alerts a pedestrian like myself says you can't. So you have to now know the traffic pattern and search around to make sure that you cross the street when the other lights are all green. And so I get that you're changing the whole thing, but I've been told that it's, I just want to express myself because I heard some talk or conversation tonight that pedestrian access has not been talked about as much. And I have, for 20 years, have been talking about pedestrian access. So I'll leave that with you.
Tom Hurley, please.
As Tom is coming up here, I'd just like to make the point that counters went down in the streets yesterday. They'll be there for the next 3 weeks. The town has 6 counters down for this project, and I know there's another private project in town that has 5 counters down. So those counters will be down for the next 3 weeks so that we get very accurate counts to what's out there now.
Which streets?
All of them, all the main roads through the square.
Yeah. Yep. We're redoing the same traffic counts we did previously, so it's all the same location. So we'll be able to look at the new data, what's changed, and update our traffic analysis accordingly.
Mr. Hurley.
Thank you. Tom Hurley, a former selectman, currently on the warrant committee, and lifelong resident. So I grew up in East Milton Square, just outside the square, so I know it very well. I do like the plan. There's one thing I'd like to clarify, and that we did not, the section of closed off Adams Street, we're taking at least part of that and making that an extra lane on Boulevard, is that correct?
That area wasn't
in other words,
too converted.
We're not making what used to be all of Adams Street an increase in the park, in terms of the 5,000 square feet that you're putting back. Is that correct?
I mean, in this current plan, most of it is because we were able to reduce the lane widths on Boulevard and only make a pretty insignificant widening.
To get the third lane?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're mostly able to repurpose the space that was there
Okay.
today.
And that being said, if we were to take some of that, what used to be Adams Street, and somebody else already asked the question, and put parallel spaces, so in other words, bump it in, because you couldn't put parallel spaces on the northbound side of Granite Avenue, right in front of the park without impeding traffic the way it is right now. But if you took some of that area and bumped it in a bit to create, you might be able to create 4 or 5 or 6 parallel parking spaces up there. I don't know how safe that would be. But
So
on Granite, northbound.
So like bumping this out.
Yeah, right there.
Like
Can I just
bumping
ask
it
a
in.
question on what you're referring to? I believe you also, to what Katie said and what Arthur Doyle said, is that you almost want to duplicate what is planned for Bryan Avenue, correct? You do a bump out so you can put along, just as we're adding.
Yes.
As we're saving the spaces on Bryan Ave, to mirror that on the Granite Ave side.
Correct.
On the northbound side.
Correct. To maybe get a few more spaces.
So you could duplicate it and get another 7.
So I think the problem you would run into would be very similar to the parking lot, is that you would be bumping out into what is existing parkland and turning it into a transportation use.
Yeah, but as long as we're still the same square footage as the old park,
Now I would agree with you. That's what the federal highway letter implied, that if we kept the square footage of the park in its current condition equal to the square footage of the park in the proposed condition,
Right.
that we could make some changes and go through the net benefit evaluation again. That's what their letter implied. However, the letter from the Secretary's office, Secretary Beaton's office, was much more strict in everyone's opinion when reading it, and that that would be a futile effort in trying to do so. And I think, you know, that's where we had sat down with the town and looked at what our options should be in order to provide the best project in the timeline and with all the safety improvements that we want to get.
I know the town was going to try and meet with Secretary Beaton. I don't know if that meeting ever happened, but that would be I mean, again, as long as we're not reducing the footprint of the park, I don't see what difference it really makes, but I understand what you're saying. In terms of the closure of Adams Street, people have a short memory. I was on the board, I was selectman when that was closed. I was one of the ones in favor of trying it on a trial basis. Everybody was holding their breath, and the traffic did get markedly better in terms of the circulation and flow.
In 2012, yes.
It really did. Now, Waze and everything else has made it tough again. But I can tell you, because I'm a frequent user in the evening of Granite Avenue coming out of Quincy into the square, and that is remarkably better going through there than it used to be. The problem you have now is you get backlogged, and even with new signalization, the Wood Street overpass creates a tremendous backlog of traffic onto Granite Avenue that is not going to be helped by signalization. So until that overpass is improved somehow or other, so the traffic can easily get out onto Adams Street, because right now you've got an awkward. You're pointing this way, you're trying to look back that way. It's a bad sight line. The traffic right now in the evening is just continuous, because if they're not coming off Brook Road down, where there is a light, they're coming straight through Adams Street. So you have to wait and wait and wait, especially if you're trying to get across 3 lanes of traffic to take a right-hand turn to go up Edge Hill Road to continue on into the western part of Milton. So I would urge that, and I know that's outside the bounds of this project, but it really is something that has to be looked at. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Amanda Dare, please.
Hi. So my question has to do, and I may not be clear on if this is the forum for it, but what are the next steps? I mean, if there is a 100% proposal, March 2018, how does the public get involved? Because that really doesn't seem that far away with, gathering this kind of information from the public and these kinds of forums.
Sure. I'll answer that for you. So we have a 75% design submittal first. It would be in December.
Okay.
And what we're intending to do between now and December is identify what structural improvements need to be made to the bridge. So we'll coordinate with MassDOT and identify where the leak is and try and troubleshoot that and make sure that we are identifying it through the design plans, solving the leak, making sure that it doesn't freeze and thaw constantly, degrade the structure of the bridge, create ice patches on 93, safety issues there. So there's that we have to do, and that will happen kind of behind the scenes, and that's probably boring to everybody. That's why I mentioned it first. And then the second part would be the activation of the park, and we're going to bring a landscape architect on board and plan a design charrette in the very near future where we can bring people to have dialogue. It wouldn't be a meeting like this. It would be kind of face-to-face, smaller sessions, and let's talk about what people want that park to look like, get that input, and start to incorporate that into the 75% design submittal and work from there. And then we'll get comment from the review agencies. We'll then reevaluate, make edits to the plan, and in March make the 100% submittal, and then the final submittal in the summer of 2018 in preparation of advertisement and construction through the advertisement of the project in the winter, so that spring of 19, we can hit the ground running and use that earmark and implement the changes.
And so, I mean, we're not the only town that 93 runs through. I mean, is there partnership with other towns nearby and how they utilize this space above the highway? I mean, I just feel like it's hard to figure out everything, you know, how to do everything right the first time through. And is there, you know, any partnership going on with any other communities?
Well, considering the project locus is entirely within Milton, and the deck is entirely in Milton, you would be just dealing with the town of Milton and the owner of the structure, which would be Mass DOT. As far, you know, the construction methods for this project should
Well,
have-
I'm talking more like about how to make use of like that green space
Oh,
there.
because of the green
Yeah,
space.
yeah, yeah.
Well, it's the town's park for them to congregate. I don't think that they would be taking comment from outside of the town, but I'll let them answer that.
That's correct.
I will say, though, I think all of us independently have looked at, I've said publicly in my short time here, if they could build the Rose Kennedy Greenway, and that's become what it is in the city of Boston, out of the central artery, we could truly make this into something that the residents of this community could enjoy, and that could become an amenity for so many different, whether it's children, the residents who live there, the businesses who make their livelihood there, things like the arts center and the schools. I think that it's incumbent upon all of us to do that. So, and just to follow up on his remarks to you, so the first was the 25% meeting, so it was a meeting very similar to this. The public was invited. That was how we got to where we are today, to this discussion, the design and all that. And so going forward would be to stay on this timeline and use these funds and get to the 75% and then the 100% and get this implemented. Because in simple terms, I know it's a lot of technical jargon, everything from what Melissa Fassel-Dunn asked about the lights, the pedestrian safety, everything that is in that square today, it's like 1960s. It's like you have a tube black and white television in your house when you deserve to have a 60-inch state-of-the-art, whatever model TV with every gadget you can think of. That's the difference. To gain 4 seconds or 2 seconds on any of the roadways there, now Granite Ave northbound, any of the commutes, is virtually impossible because the equipment is just so antiquated and so outdated. And I to go along with our architects, and I have not heard anyone, I've listened and listened, I live over there myself, and listened for as long as I can. We deserve to move these improvements and safety enhancements forward first, before anything else, just for the residents of this community.
Yeah. Great. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Joe O'Neill, please.
I think I'm pretty quick with quick answers. Number one, at the lights at the fire station, currently there is no right arrow, so you can't take a right, but everyone does. Would you make sure there's a right arrow there? I think that will help with traffic flow. You know what I'm talking about?
On the
And
double turning
coming
lane, on the new
out.
double
So
turning
when
lane.
you're coming,
On Adams Street?
if you were coming off the
Granite Ave
expressway,
going east on Adams.
Oh,
not on Adams Street,
Granite
That's-
towards Adams?
that's not, that's Granite. Granite.
Yep.
So you're coming off the highway in Granite Ave, you get to the fire station.
Right here.
You want to take a right. Legally, you can't because it's only a straight arrow.
Oh, yes.
Would you make sure there's a right arrow? And probably it should be red, it should be green sometimes for traffic flow. The other one with traffic flow, it wasn't good for pedestrians, and the selectmen several years ago made the correct decision on stopping right on red, coming from Adams Street, heading towards the expressway. If possible, if it looks like you've made massive improvements with pedestrian flow, you probably should consider bringing back right on red. You're coming from Quincy, along Adams Street, get in front of the little cleaners there. When they had right on red, the traffic did move. Traffic moves, it helps businesses, it helps me, it helps everybody. Just consider, again, if it's, the reason I stopped it was because of pedestrian
Right.
safety, and they were correct. The other one was just, a couple of people requested, but want an answer. The current road that Selectman Conlon brought up, if that becomes parkland with green, in 20 years, if you decide you want to bring the road back, can you? Is there a way of making it flexible? You're taking the road out,
No,
right?
I know what you're saying.
Let's say you
Yep.
decide the traffic pattern
Right, can you go back once
wasn't that
you-
great.
Mhm.
20 years from now, is there a way of bringing it back? They want flexibility, that's
Mhm.
all. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll evaluate that going forward.
Thank you.
Judy Gunderson?
Judy Gunderson, 32 Winchester Drive. I am totally in favor of putting Adams Street back. That's why I came to the meeting. But I have a few other things that I'd like to say. If you are not going to put Adams Street back, and I have to disagree strongly, and I think anyone who tries to go through the square might agree that going through 3 stoplights before you can get back onto Adams Street causes terrible delays, backups, jockeying, people cutting in front of each other. Nobody's happy with it. I mean, they do it because they have to do it, but it is not moving the traffic any better. It has perhaps slowed it down, which was one of the thoughts, but I don't see that slowing it down is necessary because I do not, I mean, I've only been a resident of Milton for 47 years, but I don't recall people speeding across the deck. And so that's my argument for keeping Adams Street. I just think that the pollution and the idling and the slowing. I also watched a fire engine the other night go from the fire station, of course, and try to go over, and that whole area was clogged up. They could not get across. And I remember thinking how easy it would be if you could just go straight one way or the other. I mean, for the fire station, it would be easier that way. So that's my piece about Adams Street. Because I do think that the gridlock is the biggest problem right now. The movement through the square, I'm sorry, the parking issue, I don't see, I have no contribution to make about it, except I do question, in front of the post office, there used to be 2 parking spaces, and it was taken away because the thought was that it was too dangerous. But there is now a striped area there, and people continue to park on the striped area. So if you really are going to make it safe, take away the stripes, make it part of the lane, because it's problematic. To the comment that you just made about the light, it is 22 to 24 seconds of a green to be able to go past the fire station on Granite with the Boulevard Street on your left. However, for people to go around, it is 1 minute, 0.25 seconds. So that's got to be addressed. There's got to be some more. You know, if you're gonna, if the super duper computer system is going to fix that, then I think that's great. There was a comment about pedestrian access with the poles and the telephone and the street signs. That's not just for pedestrian access. We do have some people who go through the square in wheelchairs, and they cannot do that in some places. There's quite an impediment, and especially if the area doesn't get shoveled. I would like to make a point for echoing the audible systems, and my final comment is I think having events in the park is not a good idea because I have no way to understand how people are going to park to go to the events in the park. Now, if you put something that was great for the community of people who live around it, like a splash fountain if you wanted to do that, or a carousel, or something for kids that people would go and do in the daytime because they can walk from their homes, that might be nice. But having an event in the park is really pushing the parking issue to its max. There's just no place to park. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jack Foley?
Good evening. I'd like to start off by saying it was a good presentation. I would like to understand what are the benchmarks you're using to measure success.
Just in general, well, we're working for the town, so, you know, we were
I mean, is
trying
it
to make them
time, is
happy.
it space, is it delays?
Well, the project started as a safety improvement project, you know,
Okay, how much improvement in the safety are we gonna
relieve
have?
congestion and travel delay. So we're using tried and true methods through engineering practice of shortening pedestrian crossings, providing AAB compliance and ADA compliance for all the crossings, and making sure that you know, pictures like this that were presented to us about telephone poles in the middle of sidewalks are not there. So removing all of the known deficiencies that were identified in the existing conditions. And then measurement of success for the signalization, well, we already know what the queues, what the delays, what the level of service of each one of these intersections operate at. And we have engineering tools and programs that we can all of the data, the traffic data into, and punch out projected level of service and queues and delay. And you measure the existing conditions against the proposed, and you make a sound judgment that one is better than the other, that justifies making it the improvements at the expense of the earmarks that you have available. So as far as you identify existing deficiencies, you measure the proposed conditions against them, and you implement them.
And it's made on a judgment as opposed to having actual data to say...
No, we have actual data.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I just asked. What are the things? So let me go on. You say that the reopening of the Adams would require a large revamping of your plans, yet did you not have to run those plans to a certain level of detail to compare the improvement success of one versus another, and there may have been a C and a D?
Yes, the reopening of Adams Street was not one of those other alternatives.
But I mean, you say there's a lot of people who are interested in why not.
We took counts in 2000, for the 2011 report. We are duplicating those same counts now to make sure that we're still working with the same
I'm sorry,
principles.
that's a little late in the game. I mean, you say those counts should have been part of the input.
And we had those in the original report.
But that's 5-6 years ago, right?
And that's why we're duplicating them right now. And I should mention that the counters that are out there right now are funded by the Norfolk County Commissioners. So going back to Joe's comment about trying to be fiscally responsible, we are, once again, trying to be fiscally responsible and not touching the construction funds for this.
And in your presentation, you said that, and the Adams Street closing was determined to be a success. Now, I was here, and the former selectman was here at the same time. Somebody else said, I agree with them. I didn't see a success. I've been here in the town, moved here from 1956, right after they closed the granite quarries. Joke, inside joke. How was that determined to be a success? Because I don't see much improvement, and it's late in the game, but I'll raise it now. I think one of the volume problems we have is the exit coming off of the expressway, which is outside of the boundaries that you're working on. A lot of people get off of that damn thing, scoot up all the way up to Granite, and get back on just before Boston. To me, one of the solutions would be closing that sucker off from 6 to 9 in the morning, except for emergency vehicles. Do we have data on how many people get off of that thing that are local people versus the ones that are going straight through? Because that creates, especially when it's backed up. Now, I went through there at 11:30 this morning, that route, and I ended up starting at the end of the queue, just where the expressway entrance is and the continuation for Granite. It took me 5 light cycles to get through there. Other days, I've entered that same place, but with no traffic, and I've made it the entire length. and I don't know why it was much longer light cycles at that point in time, and that's just a couple of weeks ago. So there's something happening there, but there is a tremendous volume that is outside of the scope of this thing, but, you keep shoveling crap down there and you're against the tide.
I think you're right in where our congestion is coming from is outside the
I know.
scope of this project.
But you can't solve the problem if you can't stop the input.
And I can't take and make my project bigger and bigger and bigger. I have, scope creep that just won't allow. I have a finite amount of money. I have a finite project. It's one thing to take and expand it a little bit here, but if I expand it here, it goes here. If
And
I
I'm not
expand it
asking
here
you to
and here, it
include
goes
that in the
here and here.
project. I am asking to say, can we not get the state, which is it's a interstate highway.
It's actually a federal issue to
Federal,
close
but
off the.
The state is going
close
to have
off
to deal with
the-
the federal, whoever it is. It's
to
above
close
us
off the-
anyway.
The exit is actually a federal
Right.
component.
And to see if that can be stopped. I'm not asking for scope creep. I am a consultant by nature, by profession. So,
Mr. Foley, I think we can assure you, it is something that a lot of people have talked about, considered. It's come up in different contexts, so it's something that we want to continue to keep pursuing, but it's, as Bill said, it's a little bit beyond the scope.
it
of
is,
this.
but you can't solve
Yes.
the problem if you don't start it at the problem starting point. So, I would like to say that, number one, I do like to walk. I like walkers. I used to bicycle, don't do it much more. I have an appreciation for bicycles, and I love parks. My dog and I are in the park all the time, but there's a difference between, all parks are not the same. I would like to ask how many hundreds or how many thousands of people use this park on an annual basis?
Very few. That's the problem.
But why? Why are they very few?
Well, the pedestrian conditions throughout the neighborhood here are not desirable. That's why we want to make the improvements. That was part of our goals of the project, to improve pedestrian connections. And the park, as it's situated now, does not allow a place to congregate or use
Correct.
the space. So the idea would be to activate that park with a usable space, with desire lines that match where people want to go to and from throughout the neighborhoods, that connect to all of those safety and transportation improvements that are the meat of the project.
Now, I'm going to take a little bit of exception to what the selectman here suggested relative to the Greenway in Boston, which is a tube,
Right.
versus the expressway, which is a trough.
Correct?
The tube has managed air excess. And when we saw a fire in the thing, we saw the smoke coming right out the billowing. We said, wow, we really know this sucker works. This thing, if you sit there, if I want carbon monoxide, I can sit in the back end of my truck and just breathe the exhaust. It stinks there, and nothing is going to be done on that either. So I'm suggesting that, we have very few people in the park. Somebody else suggested that, it's not a Disneyland area. Do you want and I agree, we need to improve the safety. The parking isn't an issue for me because I don't go I go through the square all the time, but parking affects all of us who do use the square because people are searching, people are trying to get into it, waiting for somebody to get out, all these various different things. They're all interconnected even if we don't use them myself like me. Okay, that covers it because I hit the last one already. I would just like to say that, as a consultant, I always had, what am I going to present to my audience? It's going to be the keeper, as this is worthwhile doing, and I'm not trying to spend more money. If we can make the solution easier and quicker, the objective to me is improving the safety, improving this, improving the flow of traffic and communication with people, not to spend all we can get our hands on. Thank you.
Can I say a follow-up to what Mr. Ford said? He brought up a good point. I've never heard this before. Carbon monoxide factor as far as on top of the deck?
Have you ever sat on the deck?
Oh, I've sat on the deck. I go to East Milton Square every day. I've sat on the deck.
Okay.
But it brings up a good point. If we are proposing to make this an amenable deck, I think it's something we need to at least look at.
Yeah, okay, we'll look at it.
I know that when the deck was built, one of the things that was an issue in the tunnel, the whole, they call it the whole, in East Milton Square, was that anyone who lived in East Milton or been around for 20 or 30 years would remember that anytime there was a thunderstorm, 93 was closed both north and south from exit 9 to exit 11 because it would flood. And when they built the deck, they had to put it in drainage as well as there's firefighting amenities down there that didn't exist because of that. But I've never heard anyone bring up the carbon monoxide
And it's
factor
not
of
the
it.
flow of, there is the flow of traffic fumes, but how many times, it's every single day. The traffic report on BZ for that stretch of the road can be recorded and played every morning. It's stopped from Furnace Brook Parkway to the gas tanks. Parking lot. It's a parking lot.
Are we
And the number of vehicles down there are compressed because there's no need for space, and they're all just blowing out exhaust.
See, you know, because you talked about a few dates here. That expressway was built, I believe, in 1955, I'm sure, as a primary route to the city of Boston for commuters coming from the south. And also for people coming from Boston and to head to the south, Cape Cod, things like Route 3 is what it is today. And we live in a far more mobile society today in 2017 than the house that we grew up in. I had 5 brothers, we had 1 car. So many houses have cars and multiple cars, and going to your exit 9, Katie's brought this up before, closing, I wish it was easy as closing exit 9. We just, but any day, one of the things that you will notice, anyone who watches the square, any hiccup at all of any type that happens on the northbound commute between the East Milton Square all the way into the Ted Williams Tunnel, the downtown tunnels, anything at all, the slightest hiccup makes that diversion even greater, makes that cutoff to take Granite Avenue down to exit 11 or cut through Quincy. I mean, we're very much aware of that, and we realize, all of us, that this is bigger than just the town of Milton, and that we have to do the best we can to use these dollars to improve this area for you. There's no doubt about that.
If I could just add one comment relative to the park. I meant to ask, what is the net number of increased parking spaces?
I don't have that number right now. We've got through so many different iterations that we haven't.
It's nowhere near what it was. I can tell you that.
Yeah, it's a negative.
It's not a negative, it's a positive, but it would have been a much bigger positive had the parking lot gone in.
I wanted to make a recognition shout out to the park that's named after a very valuable Milton citizen.
M. Joseph Manning.
But if it is a park that is nobody using.
Sir, I think we're going to need you to come up to the microphone so that the TV can pick you up.
I usually don't need a mic. I could hang a sign in the park dedicated to me, and nobody's going to know about it. And if nobody's using the park, nobody's recognizing M. Joseph Manning.
We understand that, too.
And I knew the guy, not well, but know of him. And so I'm not trying to cut that off. But if the park is not really going to be usable as a park, and I am raising questions that I don't know whether you can make it a usable park, the town does, how many businesses do we have in the town? That parking spaces are needed for the East Milton community and for the communities, for the people that are walking around there, that live there. I don't, but I feel for them.
Thank you.
How many more?
We have 2 more, 2 late breakers. Diane DiTullio Agostino. Did I get it right? Close?
You got it right.
All
Very good. Very good. It's a struggler.
No, it's not that bad. I haven't hit a bad one all night. I'm feeling pretty good.
I'm impressed. I am a town meeting member, as well as chair of the Commission on Disability, and a former selectman when the deck was first built. And I just want every resident in the town that we need to get involved, because I'll never forget when the final design was built, and I wasn't even familiar with some of the designs that were, I got a phone call from a Vietnam veteran, and he was having flashbacks because all of a sudden these pagodas were erected. The town immediately had them removed because it really wasn't a design that the residents had any input into. I don't recall ever hearing about it, and as I said, as a town meeting member, being on the board, So I want to go through a few things. My phone was almost dying, so I hope I caught everything that was being discussed. First of all, I have to say, I am so thrilled that 20 years later, we have female engineers working on the project. I think that's, it's a big difference where we are from where we were. And you're lucky to be working with them.
They're better than both of me on their worst day.
Of course. Number one concern of everyone in this room is safety. Granted, gridlock traffic is a headache, but safety has to come first. Do we actually have data of the number of crashes and the number of pedestrians hit just within the zone that we're talking about? Because I would love to see those numbers.
We have them, we put that in our functional design report, so we have those numbers. I don't have the specifics of the pedestrians.
I appreciate them, and I think residents would appreciate them also.
That may be an appendix to the 2010 parking and access study. I think we pulled that, Alex, so it may, you should go look at the website for the project, it may actually.
It might be on the website from the town or at the state level?
No, there is a website for this
From the
project,
town.
eastmountansquarestudy.com.
I've seen that part.
Yep, and there's a
I
great
didn't
long
see-
documents section, so if you look at the.
Keep going.
Yep, there's a great long document, there's a page called Documents, and in the Documents page, there is our 2010 report. It has, I compiled the appendices myself in 2011. I'll admit there's a few screws looser since then than there were in that time, but I think some of the crash data, if it is not presented in that report, there are also some PowerPoint presentations which were given, and I believe we covered crash data in there. So trawl through and take a look.
But did you just say that was in 2011?
We did an update
Yeah. Oh, you have an
with our
update, too.
functional design report, which was
What year?
later, 2014.
We will
2014.
review the project website and make sure that the information is there, and then we can, for the town, provide direction to get to it.
I mean, because we're almost at the end of 2017.
Yep.
And the Waze, I think that's how you say that app,
Yeah,
over the last 2 years,
send a lot of people through here.
the worst, right. So I think we really need the most current data to be sure of what we're talking about with the design. And I'm not an engineer, by the way. But the second issue after the traffic safety and is the pedestrians and the bicycles. The transition plates that you have on the sidewalk, I know when our town first started installing them, they were putting gray in. And we did have someone from the state who was representing a particular resident who was blind come to address our meeting a couple of years ago. And she said the whole purpose of having those bright red or bright yellow, so I hope that you take note of that. She was
Following
wonderful.
all the standards required.
But gray works. Gray is one of the options. It just is, unless they've changed
Gray
that.
is not
They
an
changed that?
It's not an
Oh, it's not an option
option.
anymore?
No.
We gotta tell the DPW that.
DPW's not doing this project.
No, but the rest of the town. Oh, I don't just deal with one thing, you know.
I
So,
get
how many Milton residents actually are sight impaired or blind? We're trying to get those numbers. I know that you talk about those accesses on the crosswalks, but are there going to be any accessible pedestrian lights installed anywhere in this project?
Yeah, so we have accessible pedestrian signals, so they'll make the audible noise.
So they all will?
Yes.
Okay, similar to Quincy Square, which was great. All right. When you talk about the structural changes that have to be made, the town of Milton is filled with gas leaks. That is not an overblown exaggeration. I brought it up 20 years ago when I was on the Board of Selectmen, and since then, you can hear it on the news all the time about the city of Boston. They're trying to stay on the gas companies to fix each and every leak. East Milton Square has had its share of being dug up over and over again. How are you going to be sure that whatever is put in there, that the gas lines under there, and as well as the water and sewer, don't have to be dug up 6 months after you design the thing?
The water's being done, that's
Yep.
being done right now.
So what happens through the design
it's-
process is we get in touch with utility companies with assistance from Mass DOT's District 6 office. Oh,
So through the design process, we'll contact the utility companies. We identify through survey all of the existing infrastructure within the project limits and identify with the utility companies that this project is coming. And then they know that there will be a moratorium after the project is complete and that they need to identify any of their infrastructure that needs upgrades prior to construction. And we coordinate with Mass DOT and the utility companies, work with the utility companies there's actually a utility site walk as part of the design process. And so they are completely in the loop on what is coming down the pipe, and they understand that they will have to make improvements as part of our project if they are required.
Is that site walk posted so residents could come along?
No, it's not. It's just with the DOT officials and the utility companies.
Okay, because, over the years, there's always the promises that, this is the procedure, it's supposed to be in place, and then things do happen. So extremely concerned about gas leaks. A gentleman, I forget who it was, mentioned a highway wall. Actually, I think it was the first speaker, regarding sound issues. And then we've also heard about air quality issues. The sound, is there any possibility to use those beautiful glass walls in the zone to reduce the amount of noise that actually goes on this quote-unquote park?
I would say nothing is off the table, and that would be part of the landscape design treatment, and we'd want to get the architect involved with your input at those design charrettes. And they would be the ones that could very much help us understand what the best implementation for sound barriers would be that would fit in with the landscape in the project.
I mean, looking at some of the pictures in here, the trees and things like that, I hope that there's clearly a clear vision for cars and traffic so that when these trees even grow up in 5 or 10 years, that they're not blocking the corners, because some of the trees look like they were close enough to the corners. So when what you just mentioned, another thing besides maybe a glass wall or those new type of unbreakable glass would be obviously landscaping. Could
Yep.
help.
I would say everything's on the table, and I would just say that the images we showed you are purely conceptual to give you an idea of the additional park space that could be created, and that on all of our design projects, we work with the municipalities and understand that there are site distances and that the tree you plant today is not the same size 15, 20 years from now. And that's where the landscape architect comes in. They help us pick the right type of tree to plant, so that way the site distances for both bikes, peds, and vehicles are maintained for the life of the project.
Okay, you did just mention, and we do see on the picture that you're extending the park. And I believe it was asked, but I'm not sure if there was a definitive answer. I think it was actually the selectman who asked it. By extending the parkland now, does that then prevent, is that really quote-unquote parkland so that we could never turn it around? I was at the back of the room, so.
I don't have a definitive answer for you, but we will coordinate with Federal Highway and Mass DOT to understand what the implications of that would be and get you that answer.
Okay, so now I'll get into this whole concept of it being used as a park. And the American with Disabilities Act and individuals who live in this town who have asthma, COPD, and some with extreme chemical sensitivity. I personally can't even be across the street in front of the dry cleaner right now due to the air quality. I asked this at the last meeting, and I'm going to ask it again. Is there or can there be air quality testing?
It's not our forte, but we will look into it and what the scope of it should be. Yes, we can do air quality testing. The air quality testing of the quality today versus the quality in the proposed condition is going to be the same. But if you want to know what the air quality is, we can help you with that.
So that gets to the point that I go into a coma from carbon monoxide. I lose my voice and completely shut down. I can't stand on the other side of that street of Granite Ave. I can't even get close to that currently. So if you're going to build a park, then I'm very concerned about anyone, whether they're children, elderly, adults, being drawn to this park to inhale the carbon monoxide that negatively impacts everyone. Everyone's impacted by carbon monoxide. And yes, it's not just that. It's an American with Disabilities Act concern with me, and I am very concerned.
While I understand the concern, that there is a park that is there today.
And no one goes there, really.
Well, and we can't put parking on the deck, so I don't know what would the alternative be.
Right.
I'm looking for input.
It's very interesting, because if you look in the town of Milton, in this little area of East Milton, there is parkland, and I can't remember, what road do you live on?
Granite Place.
Granite Place. What's the name of it?
Cranefield.
Cranefield is probably even bigger than the current park, possibly. And yet, the town doesn't use it. We don't use it as a gathering place. So you can spend all this money on a quote-unquote park that is going to try to bring people to it with carcinogenic elements that they're going to be inhaling. And has someone who has this disability that is so sensitive that I know virtually where every gas leak is, and the gas company's like, Diane, from now on, when you call, I'll go there. That's why I asked if, do a walkthrough, because I will put myself in dangerous way and walk in that area just to check on the gas leaks. Very, very concerned, and I believe that air testing should be done. In fact, if you look at, you see where the Shell station is? And then you cross Edge Hill and, what's that road over there?
Boulevard?
The Boulevard. There's a commercial building there, and one day I was in the back parking lot and was disabled due to the air quality from the expressway. So it really has to be tested. In fact, I think one of the business owners over there told me they have to change the filters constantly on the roof because of what's being sucked in from the area. So it's not just people complaining about, oh, what if? It's a reality, and you really need to take it seriously. The only other thing I want to ask you is the deck itself. I know this probably has nothing to do with your project, but that deck has been there for over 20 years. 25 it's been? And when the Jersey barriers went up, we were expecting granite like the Charlestown deck. I don't know if you know in particular where I'm talking about. There's a deck right when you come off of that bridge. It's a gorgeous deck. It's got granite. Milton is next to the city of Quincy. That's where all the granite comes from. And yet we ended up unexpectedly with Jersey barriers. The lighting on the deck, when I was a selectman, we were at the Selectmen's Conference for the state, and the lighting company representatives said that they had put way too many lights in. It was not recommended to put light fixtures that close to each other. And when they first went up, I think they might have changed the quality of the bulbs in them to save money, because I think the town is paying for them. And everyone used to say the pilots looked at it as another landing zone. So it's just, these are things that residents have to stick with it, and when the plan is moving forward for the design, and maybe the design will just be to have open green space to improve the air quality, because the more trees you do plant there and the more bushes, it does improve air quality. But to have people, if you do air quality testing, and I know commercial air quality testers that I can let you have their information, nobody should be sitting on that deck, and especially not little children. Especially not little children. We're coming up October 16th on our Halloween stroll, and I know they've used that deck in the past, and I just can't get over watching children knowing how bad the air quality is. It's not during a weekday, it's on a weekend, so that you have to check different times. But the last thing that I mentioned may not be something you deal with. Underneath the deck, the lighting is gone. I don't know if you have any pull with the state, but there are hardly any lights that are illuminated anymore. And there's more and more accidents there because you're just going under a tunnel, and all of a sudden you understand that shadow hits you, and there's just been too many accidents. So I greatly appreciate the work you're doing, and hopefully I'll still be around to keep bugging you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, folks, speaking of pilots landing in places, people are taking off. So what I want to do is, we still have a couple people who haven't had their first bite at the apple, and it looks like, Arthur, you are perhaps going for round 2. Are you standing for that reason?
I've already joined her.
Oh, okay. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to have the 2 folks who haven't gone yet, and then I'll have Arthur go, and if folks can try to remember the 3-minute rule that Bill Clark mentioned.
That's why I keep hitting my phone.
Yeah, I think you're a good man. Okay, so Cheryl, come on down.
Good evening.
Hello,
Hello, folks. Cheryl Tagayas, member of the Planning Board and Chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and a town meeting member. I have a couple of detailed kind of comments and questions, and then I have a broader kind of question. So the detail has to do with all of the pedestrian crossings. So if you're coming from Boulevard, how many cycles would you have to push a light for to get over to the other side of Granite Ave and Adams Street? So there's lots of crosswalks there, and I'm curious how that really works, because are all of those traffic lights going to be synchronized, so all of the turns that are being made, that a pedestrian doesn't have to wait 2 or 3 cycles there?
So I'm not sure where.
Starting
Where would
from
you
like
start?
here.
Yeah, well,
You're really referring to all of them.
yeah, I'm really thinking, the red one? If you're coming from, whether it's here or whether it's here, and you're gonna cross, you know, how many times is the traffic, can I keep this, because I have another question.
I'm surprised you didn't bring your own, to be honest with you.
And I ask this because I've been a pedestrian and a bicyclist in this area, and I've been in my car in this area too. And, you know, you see people standing at this intersection right here. There's very little sidewalk to stand there. And there's lots of cars here, and it's a little intimidating because there's lots of cars down here too. So if we're going to make pedestrian improvements here, I'd really like to make sure and understand that they're going to work and that won't be frustrating. When my kids were young, I used to bring them here and hold their hands for dear life, being afraid that they would take off across the street. And there's just lots of different movement at this intersection. And I think my understanding is sometimes more crosswalks is more of a problem than less. Like if you're directing people to get across in a certain place, is this too many crosswalks in here? So I just throw that out for you to consider. And then the other place here is, I find this to be a pretty difficult and dangerous area right here. And a lot of people cross right here. They park in these spots here and they go to patronize the businesses here, or they're crossing here. It's another spot that I think, pedestrian-wise, I don't know what the improvement is here. And then also for this bike lane along here, this is already pretty narrow and pretty dicey for the pedestrians and the cars that go there. So I wonder whether there's some room here to actually think about whether there's adequate width here. And then even here, cars, so the driver is over here trying to look and see if cars are coming this way, so if they can make that turn. And then they might be backed up here, and a pedestrian's waiting for that crosswalk. So I guess I'm not sure how that's improved in this plan. Bill, I'm already out of time. I didn't get to my big picture. The big picture from,
well, do you want me to answer your question?
Sure.
So I guess to answer your question, so the crossing by Bassett Street, that's going to be signalized now. So that's the improvement there. So you'll be able to press the pedestrian push button and you'll be able to cross with a walkway across.
So that's
by Bassett
right
Street.
here?
So that one, yes.
Okay.
Over by the ramp, so we are making geometric improvements for the ramp so that it's not as large of a radius coming around the curve. So the vehicles will travel at a slower speed and their entry angle into Granite Avenue won't be so sharp where they would have to basically turn all the way around. So you would basically just, have to turn to the right to be able to see oncoming vehicles.
Is there a reason why that's not perpendicular? It seems like it would be a more traditional street if it were perpendicular there.
We wanted to keep it as a yield control condition, just to better process the vehicles traveling through that area and to allow vehicles to be able to get onto Granite Avenue easier, since there are signals that are very close to that intersection.
So again, it's a little bit of you're prioritizing the car over the pedestrian if you're trying to move the vehicles through there faster with that curve.
I think it's more of a compromise position.
yeah.
Right now, you've got the lever pushed to 10 for a vehicle and pretty well, maybe 2 for a pedestrian. I think this option is trying to even the balance out while continuing to maintain a decent level of service going through there, given all the voiced concerns this evening about air quality.
They're not going to be able to go through there as fast as they are now.
I mean, one of the things to think about with pedestrians here, I'm sure it's come up in other venues, but, a lot of the children in this part of town go to the Collicutt School, and to get to the Collicutt School, if they're going to walk, they're going to have to cross here somewhere to get up and go that way to the school. And so I think, thinking about how people really are going to move through there as pedestrians. If you do counts on the cars, I don't know if you've done counts for the pedestrians. Obviously, it's not very pedestrian-friendly right now, and it's not very bike-friendly right now, so hopefully those improvements
The new
will
counts
make that.
actually will have bike and pedestrian counts in it.
Okay. So the bigger picture is that this is one Mass DOT project. and there's 2 other Mass DOT projects down Granite Ave. And when I went to the meeting, one of the meetings that Mass DOT had on the intersection of Squantum and Granite Ave, and I asked about how this is related to the project on Granite Ave, nobody had an answer. And so we have 3 here, and we're going to have probably a gap in between, maybe at least 1 or 2. It'd be nice if we had people talking to one another and we had a bigger picture plan for how this is going to improve conditions along Granite Ave in East Milton Square. And it really ties into something that we're really interested in the master plan, which is traffic comprehensively in this part of town. So I think when we look at these and we say this is the limits of our boundaries of our work on a particular project, and you hear from people that there's much bigger issues, I think overall as a town we have to figure out how to address the bigger issues and how one project ties into the bigger picture instead of them being standalone projects. Thank you.
I do know that we have been having conversations with Mass Highway. Mass Highway is actually here tonight. Some of those people are actually working on the Granite Ave Squantum Street intersection. So they're hearing you at the same time.
Good.
They know about this project. Of course, they know about the other project. So there is a little bit of discussion going on. It is the same department. It's within the same offices.
Right. I mean, so as we know, if there's a bike lane that's striped here for this part of the project, there'll be a gap. It'll pick up at the intersection and might continue on. But what does that do for the safety of the bicyclists in the meantime? So having, that sort of bigger picture, I think I know they look at it as making improvement when you're doing work, but on the ground, it's a lot different if you're trying to encourage, the use of the bike trails are not that far from East Milton
Correct.
Square if you can get to them on Granite Ave, but take your life in your hands to do that now.
We're also putting in for a Complete Streets program, and one of the pieces of Complete Streets is to take and identify all of those projects. We've already signed all those contracts with the state. We're waiting to complete to start the plan, which would then take all of those projects and put them into one place. We're doing that right now.
Cheryl, at the July or August meeting on the Granite Ave Squantum Street project, that came up again, and the MassDOT did say that they were aware of the need to connect both of these projects. And for the one further up towards Dorchester, they said as much later, so there hasn't been a lot of consideration of that one at this time. But they know that there's a need to connect all 3 at some point.
Great. Thank you.
Good point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Lee?
You must be talking about the same thing.
Thank you very much. Lee Toma, member of the Bicycle Advisory Committee and Traffic Commission. And first of all, I'd like to thank you very much for all your effort and taking our feedback here. One of the things that I wanted to ask about was something that Cheryl had talked about, and that is looking at Granite Avenue northbound there. It's relatively narrow there. I wondered if some of that 5,000 square feet could be used to kind of bump things over a little bit to the left and maybe provide a little bit more buffer space so that people can more safely get in and out of their cars and so people can bike through there. I don't know if there are any structural considerations that get in the way there, but if it's possible, that would be, I think would be helpful. Bill, you had mentioned the new video counters do pedestrian counts as well. Did we have pedestrian counts previously? I don't think I saw those. So
We did. We just
At
I just
the
don't.
intersection.
Yeah.
okay.
I don't know if we had them through
But
this.
thank you. I think I've done bike counts there, and there are very few people biking there, but I've seen that there are typically a couple hundred people per hour crossing over the deck there during the rush hours, and I think people might be surprised to see just how many people are walking across already. Also, I'd like to suggest a possible curb bump out at the intersection of Bryant and Boulevard to shorten that crosswalk there.
Where the hatch area is?
This one?
On the other corner, diagonally across.
Where the
Yeah,
hatch
right
area
by the
is?
hatch there.
Oh,
Yep. Okay. And earlier this year, we had a road safety audit with Mass Highway and town officials for Granite Ave at the highway interchange up at the Dorchester border. And I'd hope that people can talk to our representative Driscoll there and hopefully get that on the list of projects to move forward, because it's a huge safety issue and would benefit the community a lot, I think. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Arthur Toyle, round 2.
We do want to thank Representative Bill Driscoll, who's been here all night, also an East Milton resident who's been very involved in this project.
Hi, Arthur Doyle again. I'll be very quick, and I apologize for the ragweed allergies. It's that time of the year, every year. And I mean this with due respect. I just want to make sure the vocabulary used is clear, and I'm going back to the paved section of roadway within the park. I think I heard a comment to the effect that someone didn't think that that was permissible to be used due to a letter from the Department of Transportation. And I would hope that that's not a unilateral, strict constructionist interpretation of a letter without advocacy by the consultants on behalf of the town of Milton, and an opportunity for the appropriate parties in the town of Milton to sit down and negotiate all alternatives with the Department of Transportation, so that there's a clear understanding of what is possible and what is not possible. The second is with respect to the comment of a few minutes ago that there can be no parking in the park. Nobody's asking for there to be parking on the park land. What is being asked is whether or not the non-park land within the perimeter under discussion can be used somewhere for parking. And once we have an answer to that, I think many, many people will be satisfied. So I just ask that these considerations be verbalized appropriately and communicated without ambiguity or without a stoplight up front. Thank you.
Just to follow-up, we've had a lot of discussions. This began with the boulevard. We will absolutely be advocating strongly to do whatever we can, because you are correct. You're taking, if it doesn't open, you have that piece of, my personal opinion is we have that piece of parcel of land that we intend to fight for to get whatever we need to.
Thank you.
To answer your question.
Thank you
and
very
we will
much.
continue to do that.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur.
John Cronin, please.
I want to thank, I'm John Cronin. I'm a former park commissioner. I want to thank Bridget and Mark from Howard Stein for excellent presentations. They really got the project on track now, and I look forward to working with the landscape architect, and I'll suggest a list of people you might include in those charrettes to Bill Clark, park commissioners and shade tree committee members. On the ventilation, it was when we were working on building the deck, we wanted to have it bigger, longer than 400 feet, but the federal government said that 400 feet was as long as we could make it without mechanical ventilation. So you have no ventilation except what's spilling out at the end by the park. Parks are not necessarily for gathering places. They're also to be looked at. They're visual. And this one is designed to be visual. It's designed to look at. We're trying to cure the ugliness of the canyon. So we were able to get, with the help of Congressman Donnelly, a concrete deck designed and a park on top of it. It was to look nice, as opposed to the ugliness of the canyon. Crane Field, which is a nearby park, is not a gathering place. Turner's Pond, Pope's Pond, the Emerald Necklace, they're not gathering places by and large. So it's artificial for us to be trying to go through all kinds of hoops to have gazebos and drinking fountains in this little park that is to be looked at, not really. Yes, you walk through it to the post office, but it isn't it was never intended that people to gather there. We attract a lot of people there. So I just wanted to clear that up. Holidays. Yes, at Christmas time, there's a Christmas tree lighting, and Halloween is a brief ceremony, but they're both very brief ceremonies. The children are not exposed at any great extent to bad air, and the police are very good, but it requires police to be there to stop the lanes of traffic and to get the pedestrians back and forth. But they're quickly out of there, and I think that when you talk about events, you've got to keep that in mind. I did look at the letter again from Jeffrey McEwen, the Division Administrator of the Federal Highway, and they are committed to help and to help find parking. If it's not on the deck, they'd like to find some near the deck. So they wrote this. This funding, that $2.2 million, could potentially be used to develop parking elsewhere in the area if this resulted in converting the existing restricted service parking adjacent to the park to public parking. That's on Bryan Avenue. Those dash lines, there are 11 parking spaces there. They made the suggestion. The Board of Selectmen acted on that, and they had the Traffic Commission review it, and those are about to be posted, I think, for public parking instead of service zone parking. That's 11 spaces. The south parking space that was proposed originally for between the Shell station and the fire station, that had a net of 11 or 14 spaces, depending upon whether you could count 4 spaces on the Adams Street deck that you're going to close, and 3 spaces on the Boulevard Street deck, and 7 spaces that you say in your report are lost because of the access to the on driveway and exit driveway. So, Federal Highway's already come up with 11 spaces. We're only going to gain the whole project of 7 years. We were only going to gain 11 to 14 spaces. So things are out of proportion sometimes. This is, again, the Federal Highway. We are available to discuss the funding flexibilities as they relate to the specific funding for this project. We look forward to working with you on a solution. This is an agency they have oversight only, but they have a piggy bank. They have the $2.2 million. My question was, did we invite them, Jeffrey or John McVan, to come tonight? Did they know about this hearing?
I didn't specifically invite them.
I can check, sir, but I believe they're part of the stakeholder database from going way back into the parking access study.
I believe
I have to reference that.
I believe they didn't get invited. But I'm just urging you to work with them because you have limited amount of money left in your contract. They're very willing to help, but they're not going to tell the town what to do. The town has to tell them what the town wants. Anyways, tremendous progress tonight, a very good report, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was the last registered speaker.
Is there anyone else here tonight who would like to offer a comment or make a question?
State Representative Bill Driscoll. Do you have a check? I'll be kidding. We need a little humor.
Thank you for everyone for being here tonight for the presentation. Thanks for those that are sticking it out. I normally don't comment on what I would call hyper-local, but since it's a MassDOT project and I personally live in East Milton Square, I feel like I wanted to ask a few questions and make a few comments and considerations. I should have brought my laser pointer, but...
We'll get back to it. Why don't we go give it back? You want it?
Yeah, if I could borrow it for 1 sec, that'd be... Save some time and...
You know it's going to be this formal.
I know. Red button. All right, just a question on crossing the post office here. There was some consideration made involving these crosswalks and this light. Is this light pole for the traffic signals that they're suspended from, is that going to move at all from its current location?
Yes.
Okay, because the consideration, we almost had a special election for state rep because a bus came through here, and I was trying to cross this crosswalk, and a lovely Milton neighbor grabbed me before I walked across. This is a problem intersection, so is this line, will that move as well from its current location, or is that slated to stay in the same?
From its current location, like in the field now, or from
In the
its
field
plan?
now, yeah.
Yes, I believe this is moved from
The
one
light's
area
going
to
to get closer to the stop line. Right now, the light is way out there, and people are driving to the light. So the light's going to become closer, the line will become closer to the light, and it will be definitive, because right now, everybody drives over it and you can't see it.
Right, yeah.
There
That's
will
been
be
my...
improvements to both the positioning of the mast and the line itself.
Great. Yeah, it's been my experience that the optics of it don't work for some of the drivers that are coming through here.
It's too far away.
It's too far away, yeah. I appreciate the consideration that's been given to the Boulevard Street. I know former Selectman Tom Hurley was talking about this earlier, a question. My big takeaway from the meeting 2 years ago was that there was enough space here to add a third lane without taking any additional square footage from anywhere else and repurposing it. And I guess the comment is we're putting a lot of faith in the light system, the smart light system, in that's going to be the main improvement driver for a lot of the traffic and pedestrian safety. So if there's one thing that's happening now, another observation I'll make is traffic heading this direction down Bryan Ave, turning here, we're getting a lot of congestion of people waiting to go through here and blocking this intersection. And I understand that one of the reasons that the left-hand turn possibility has been rejected to date is because of the possible congestion here and here, if I'm following correctly. So again, not a traffic engineer, but if we can move any of these lines, the stop lines, in the same way that we can move this one, whether it's at Granite Ave or at Bryant Ave, to stop that possible gridlock situation. I don't know if you can answer that now, or if it's something you have to consider later. It's just something that dawned on me related to the issue of going left. Because I just, discussions that we've had informally with many individuals, to have 3 lanes here and not have one going the other direction to alleviate some of the problem flow that's off the scope of this. It just seems like that as much attention can be paid there, because off the scope further down past Bassett, we have exiting traffic from East Milton, the marketplace there, and the cleaners and so forth. The traffic is moving at a higher rate of speed typically here than here, as long as it starts at a red light, obviously, but we would pull undoubtedly many cars going up Edge Hill that right now have to go all the way through, and add to that congestion coming out of the gas station and the marketplace.
We do know that there is a problem up on Wood Street Extension and Antwerp Extension. We have been talking about that issue here in town. It's not necessarily a part of this project, but this team actually knows that that problem is there. They know that we're working on it. Our issues come back that where we get a very heavy flow of cars coming north on Granite Ave and using that in the afternoon, thereby causing that, if I come out of the square and I want to use Antwerp Street to go towards St. Agatha's, I can't cut across because the traffic is so heavy coming down Granite Ave. We know that we're trying to work on an issue for, a solution for that, but it is a question. If you were to take 2 buses and put them in here, and some of those cars got in the way, you would clog this thing up, and you couldn't get through Bryant coming into the square. You couldn't get them going out, which is why the queuing area isn't big enough. We've contemplated looking at things like making Boulevard from the top, making it 3 lanes, so that we could actually get more people out and get them into the 3 lanes down on the bottom. In order to do that, we'd have to make Edge Hill one way. We're looking at all of this. It's a question of which one makes sense and which one are we hurting when we do that.
Right.
We have looked at taking Edge Hill. Make Edge Hill a one-way. You'd pick up 10 to 15 parking spaces because of the angle or reverse angle parking that you could get on the right, thereby helping the post office, the art center, and the Baptist church. So we are looking at other things besides just what we see here. But for every, I'm going to go to your comment, cause and effect. For every time we touch something here, it has an effect someplace else. So we are cognizant of it. We are looking at it. We do bring it to this team. They look at it. They tell us yes, no. And then we bring it to the public, and there we have other issues. So we will run them again. We will, we have the new numbers coming. 3 weeks, we should have the new numbers. They'll be delivered back here, and we can see are these things going to, did what we planned, will what we planned work?
Go ahead. You
No, I'm
finish.
done.
I just want to add, when you first spoke of this tonight, and Representative Driscoll and I have talked about this a lot, and I've advocated publicly for this. At the 25% hearing, I brought it up when I was, my previous position as chair of the Traffic Commission. We discussed it at length. And part of the thing, and anyone who lives on this side of East Milton, and I heard the gentleman speak tonight how he wouldn't want to see it, is, but what happens is you come in northbound on Granite Avenue, to get to Edge Hill to put, you have to go around the entire square, which makes you become part of the congestion and the gridlock. The other thing is that because that's the only avenue into East Milton from the south, from Quincy, is there's an immense, and anyone who lives on Governors, Grafton, Plymouth Avenue knows there's an immense push from the Quincy side through Milton each and every day. And we've tried so many times to change this, but the baseline is its volume. And as long as you don't have to avoid this gridlock, the only alternative is to cut through those neighborhoods. So by trying to make that left-hand turn, it would keep you from having to go through the entire square, become part of the congestion, and let you take a left and go in a far more direct route to where you want to go, to that side of town. And it just, like, I mean, one of the things you can tell from anyone who's lived here, you've been here long enough to know, Milton abutting the city of Boston, particularly in the 93 corridor, is not an amenity to the things that are great about this community. And this is something that we're going to have to work on. And we really want to do this right, to try and answer more than just parking, or more than, we want to try and answer as much of it as possible. Other projects, other intersections, for the benefit of the entire community. I think that's what I want to say.
Thank you. I would second the potential for a right-hand turn arrow here, particularly with these 2 lanes are stopped. Certain times of day, I know that this is clear, and taking a right, sorry, Katie, would be possible. So that's something too. And then a question on, is this island moving from its current in the field location?
It's shifting slightly. You can see right here is the old edge of the island.
Okay.
So it is shifting slightly, yes.
It's moving over a little so that we get the second lane.
So you can get the
Yeah, it's kind of a
The
phantom.
second lane coming through here.
Yeah, that's a welcome,
Which is
welcome
why
addition.
you can actually put the right arrow back, because they can stay in the right lane. All you have to watch is the stuff coming out of Boulevard.
Right, that's terrific. Yeah, thank you again for all the work on this, Bill, and and talking to me, informally and formally here tonight about the turning. Again, if it comes back that we can't do the turning lane, I'll fully accept that. And again, appreciate everyone's work on the project. I concur with the statements that have been made tonight about wanting to move this project forward so that we can improve the safety and traffic flow. So any way that I can avail myself to be helpful, and later on in the discussions about redesigning the park, really welcome that discussion. So thanks everybody.
Thank you, Representative Driscoll.
Thank you.
Last call. Is there anyone else here who would like to make a comment? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Kate Sweeney Regan. I live on Garden Street, and I'm the owner of East Milton Dental. So the concern that I have I completely agree with what Arthur Doyle said about making sure that we completely exhaust every possibility for getting parking on there. The second thing is kind of what Mr. O'Neill said with the crosswalks. I can tell you I walk from Garden Street to my office every day, and the way these crosswalks are set up now are going to be troublesome. So the one that goes, I don't know if you have the little pointer, the one that goes.
Red button.
Perfect. This one here, nobody will use, because when cars come down here, they're either going to stop here, and which means that you have the ability to cross here, or if cars are coming this way, then you have the ability, so you either can cross here or here, but crossing here, we were talking about everyone coming and taking a left-hand turn, at no point will anybody ever use this crosswalk. So there's no point of putting it in because it's just going to be a distraction. The next thing is same thing with this crosswalk here. Nobody will ever use this crosswalk because either you will go when the light is stopped to go this way or to go this way. What Mr. O'Neill said about everybody, when I walk home, this is my office here. So I walk across here and I go up here to my house. So when people are taking this right here, even though there's a no turn on red sign, almost every day I can get nailed by a car right here, somebody going right on there. So having a red arrow is really important there. But that brings me into having 2 lanes here is very dangerous, because as you take this right, even if you have an arrow, there's 2 lanes here. The reason my daughter's with me today is because my husband was hit by a car on September 1st right here. So adding another lane crossing from, the most popular places in East Milton Square, I'd love to say is my dental office, but it's not. It's Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, Abbey Park, Peel Pizza, Milton House of Pizza. Everybody is crossing right here, which there is no crosswalk. Right. So either you cross here, which nobody's going to go back there, or all the way down by Stella's. So everybody's walking across the street right here, and if you're adding another lane of traffic, that's going to make it extremely dangerous. So just tossing that there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And again, I know the Traffic Commission has talked time and time again about looking to find a way to take in place a crosswalk, probably up by Franklin Street.
Right.
You can't take in place one mid-block. You have to take in place it at corners. So we have taken and looked at them. It just becomes an issue of, to do that, where is the landing point? And that's still our
I
issue.
just wouldn't put another lane unless you had a landing point there.
Mhm.
Was there another hand in the back over here? Judy, could you come up to the microphone so that you can be heard? And while Judy's coming up, is there anyone else? I thought I saw another hand over in this side of the room. Okay, yes, sir, if you could then come up and we'll get to your question right afterwards.
There are going to be 3 lanes, if I'm correct, coming from Boulevard, crossing Boulevard from this side to this.
Between Bryant and Granite Avenue.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, but then you have 2 lanes going down Granite Ave, and you have 2 lanes coming down Adams Street. There's no room for 2 lanes.
2 lanes to turn into one. Am I correct?
That's a
2 lanes
bad place to
Correct.
turn 2 lanes into
2
one.
lanes
Merge into one just past the fire station. Same way it is right now.
I believe that's how it is now.
I know, it's bad. I'm just questioning continuing a not-so-good situation.
Thank you. And Mr. Curran.
As Joe comes up here, this meeting is to gather the local input. That input we'll try to use the pertinent data and input it into the 75% design. So that's the outcome for tonight.
respectful of time, I'm just going to be quick. I agree with the lady who owns the dental office. There are too many crossings there, and I just wanted to tell everyone that. I do also agree that maybe on Granite Ave, there's 2 right turning lanes. We're talking about the right on red, but there's actually 2 lanes there. And as someone who lives in the square, I don't think there's a lot of traffic backing up to take that right-hand turn, but that's for the traffic professionals to kind of evaluate. I think going through is where the issues are. And then scope creep, and again, what we're gonna, if there are design changes outside of these boundaries, which over the last 10 years, I live on Grafton Ave. Grafton Ave is at the top of this, and if the roadway configuration, and that was why I asked my question about Edge Hill Road and Bryan Ave and 2 lanes, 1 lane, whatever direction they're going in, there is a bottleneck that will happen at the top of that intersection if we start changing that, which is outside the scope of this project, which I just want to make sure that if changes are made and it changes the direction of flow of those 2 streets for some reason, that the scope of the project needs to expand to see what happens up, in my opinion, at the intersection of Grafton Ave, Boulevard Street, and Edge Hill Road.
You mean by Jackrabbit?
What's that?
Right by Jackrabbit.
Yeah, right by
I get
Jackrabbit,
it.
where you come across. I mean, I don't want to,
Right in front of it.
I
I
get
think
it.
you understand what I'm saying, so I'll just end that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think
I
we're
don't
done.
see anyone else.
We want to thank everybody for coming tonight. The team will be getting back together and downloading all the information we just got. Please keep an eye on the website, and we will keep it up to date with the new versions as they become available. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.